So just starting that again, that we're seeing exponential population growth. So we have too many people on the planet, bearing in mind that the ecological footprint of this 7.85 billion people comes to 1.7 planets. So we have too many people taking too much. And if we think about the world in terms of that we have a certain amount of resources that the world can replenish each year, we used up all of that by the 22nd of August last year. So that means for the remainder of the year, we were living beyond the world's capacity to replenish and stealing from future generations. So there's a Earth Overshoot Day is if we say that there's a certain amount of resources that we need to sustain people and life on Earth, then on the 22nd of August, we passed our limit last year. So it just gives you a sense of what 1.7 planets in excess looks like. So too many people taking too much, and an economic system based on saying that we can have infinite growth on a finite planet. And currently, global debt, as of December 2020, was 277 trillion. Sorry, 277 trillion. Now, trillion is a million, or the bit that we also understand is 365% of the world's gross domestic product. So we have living well beyond our means by borrowing from future generations and indebting future generations. So too many people taking too much, an economic system based on infinite growth and incredible inequality. 1% of the people have 44% of wealth, and 60% of the people have 1% of wealth. And the interesting thing is that while we've been going through the last 12 months of the pandemic, the combined wealth of billionaires globally, but particularly in the United States, increased by 39% in just under 12 months up until January 2021. So their wealth went from 3 trillion to 4 trillion. And at that same time, the wealth of the 60% reduced dramatically. So these are the underpinnings of everything that I talk about now. All of these things, too many people taking too much, and an economic system based on massive inequality, and that we can continue growing infinitely on a finite planet. So those things are what is driving, what sits underneath all of the problems that we face. So let's have a look at them. First of all, we're going to talk about lack of leadership, and I mean this in terms of lack of leadership to build peace and harmony across the world. And it comes out as a top concern consistently in the Youth Leading the World program. Almost half of the world is under 30 years old. So we have gross underrepresentation of youth. In Australia, only 1% of senators are under 34. Who can unmute their computers, please? Well, I didn't finish when I was fiddling. Globally, 6% of parliamentarians are under 35. Michelle or Jennifer, can you find who's not muted, please? And
yes, working on it.
Thank you. And 80% of youth say that they don't feel that politicians have their best interests in mind. When we look at the food situation, we're seeing a lowering of production that's being brought out by increasing drought, heat, and extreme weather. And we've actually had a 1.8 degrees Celsius increase in land temperatures. We're also seeing increasing demand for food at the same time. That's coming from population increase, from the push to have more meat consumption, particularly in Asia, and the production of biofuels. So that leads to an increasing cost of food, and we have low resilience in our food systems that are often based on specialized. Can everyone make sure they keep their microphones on mute, please? Low resilience in our food chains with a lot of just-in-time supply chain. So I know in my local community, there's at any one time, there's about 3 days of food. So if we have a really tough storm or something, the risk is that there's insufficient food to go around. And globally, a tenth of the people in the world are undernourished, or 1 in 9, it's more than a tenth. When we look at the water situation, again, global warming is leading to more frequent and severe droughts. We're also seeing severe depletion of groundwater because of over extraction. Currently, 780 million people, so that's 1 in 10 people, have no safe water to drink. And that usually means that they have to spend hours every day carrying water, and that water is of a quality that it will make them sick if they drink it. And 2.5 billion globally have no sanitation. Rural women in Africa are walking up to 6 kilometres every day, hauling 40 kilos of water. And every day, more than 800 children under the age of 5 die from diarrhea, a completely preventable disease that's come from them drinking polluted water polluted with sewage or human poo. When we look at what's happening in nature, and this has actually deteriorated, we're seeing now that 60% of the world's vertebrates have disappeared in the last 40 years. And that's caused by land clearing, deforestation, pollution, and overhunting. Plants and animals are unable to adapt to the rapidity of temperature increases by climate change, and the extinction rate is running about 1,000 times, up to 10,000 times what's normal. And this rate of extinction is absolutely unprecedented since the 5th wave of extinction, which was when the dinosaurs went extinct after we had a massive meteor hit the Earth. And so there are many scientists saying that we're now in the midst of the 6th wave of extinction that they call the Anthropocene, because Anthropocene means caused by human activity. And something that's come to the fore this last 12 months is the impact of zoonotic diseases. COVID-19 is a zoonotic disease. What that means is that it is transmitted from animals to humans. So currently 60% of infectious diseases across the world come from animals, but 3/4 of new diseases in people come from animals. And because of disruption of forests by logging, mining, and road building, and because of urbanisation and population growth, people are coming in closer contact with wildlife. And that is creating opportunities for transmission of disease from wildlife to humans. And so this COVID-19 pandemic is a zoonotic disease. It's a new disease that has come out of the wildlife, yet to be identified where it's come from. There is strong talk amongst the scientific community that it's based on bats in China, but that's yet to be genetically determined. But we can expect that we will be seeing more of this, because you think about Ebola, you think about HIV/AIDS, all 75% of new diseases that are coming out are coming from the animal kingdom into the human, because of the destruction of the environment that we're bringing about. When we look at the biosphere, so the biosphere is the name we give to the air that and the living portion that surrounds the surface of the earth. And we have an atmosphere, a layer of air, and that atmosphere protects us from cosmic radiation coming in from space. So without our atmosphere being intact, life would not be possible on Earth. And in particular, the carbon in the atmosphere traps the heat that's present on Earth, so that, and coming in from the sun, that also makes life possible. So the layer of carbon is very important. However, because of human activity, again, we have seen severe pollution happening in our air, in our atmosphere, and this kills about 7 million people every year and has now become the single biggest environmental health risk globally, the breathing of polluted air. When we see plastic waste, 8.3 billion tonnes of plastic have been produced since the 1950s, but only 9% of that has been recycled and reused. And the remaining, some of it has been burnt, which is, bad for polluting the atmosphere, but 79% has then ended up in landfill or the environment. So that's impacting particularly in the oceans, 700 marine species, including birds, and microplastics that appear in a lot of the, modern, modern products are distributed in the environment and actually are ingested or taken in by animals and humans. And interestingly, Australia has been previously recycling by exporting our waste to China and Southeast Asia, but that's now being rejected. And in Australia, for the first time, we're actually having to face up to our own mess, which is a good thing, to change the way that we behave. So this ecological threats register is a really important concept. It's an assessment of the impact of all of these ecological threats that we face on different parts of the world. And it includes an assessment of the impact of population growth, water stress, food insecurity, droughts, floods, cyclones, rising temperatures, and rising sea levels. And the Ecological Threats Register identifies 3 ecological hotspots across the world. The first is in the Sahel Horn Belt of Africa, from Mauritania to Somalia. So sadly, Senegal and Sierra Leone are in the thick of that. The Southern African Belt from Angola to Madagascar, and the Middle East and Central Asian Belt from Syria through to Pakistan are the areas that are most critically at risk of the impacts of these ecological threats that we currently face. And this is a photo from Abdurrahman in Kenya showing damage to someone's house caused by elephants as they've come out of the national park next to where he is and into their community. And then we have the climate crisis or the climate emergency. We're seeing ice melting, sea levels rising, acid oceans, and more extreme weather, fire, drought, floods and storms. And it was, yeah, certainly we've seen a lot of that in the last week, from the extreme, cold from the Arctic coming down into the US in particular, causing ice storms, and even hearing from Katrin that it's unseasonably warm in Iceland. All of that is deeply disturbing. So let's have a just look at the cause of this climate crisis and what the greenhouse effect is. So Jennifer and Michelle, there are 3 people in the waiting room at the moment, if you're able to see if you can get them in.
Yep.
Onto it. So the first thing to say is that this climate crisis is caused by human activity. And if we look at the solar radiation is coming in from the sun and it reaches the Earth's atmosphere. Some of it is reflected back into space by the atmosphere. Some of it, or most of it, reaches down to the Earth and is absorbed, and that's what keeps us warm. So, and then part of that is then re-radiated back out to space, and a little bit bounces back here because the atmosphere keeps it in. As we have started to burn more and more fossil fuels, and that's been since the 1800s and the Industrial Revolution, the amount of carbon in the atmosphere has been getting more and more and more. And as we get more and more carbon in the atmosphere, that greenhouse effect is trapping heat. Now, so that means that instead of that heat being radiated out to space, the heat here is being trapped to a much bigger extent, and temperatures on the Earth are rising. So we've seen an increase in carbon dioxide levels, and we're now living in a carbon dioxide or a carbon in the atmosphere highest than it's been in over 800,000 years. Currently, it sits at 417 parts per million. So we're looking at, a level about here. And that's well above anything that we've experienced in 800,000 years. And for a safer climate, the scientific community is saying we need to keep carbon levels below 350 parts per million. So we're well above what's needed for a safe climate, and we're already experiencing now in our times the impact of that, and that's really our big challenge to change. So if we look in Australia, this top graph is showing the increase in temperatures in Australia over the last 40, 50 years. And in Australia, interestingly, last year in New South Wales, we had a 1.8 degree temperature increase. So globally, we already have a 1 degree temperature increase. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is saying expect 3 to 4 degrees by 2100, by the end of this century. But we need to keep temperature increases below 1.5 degrees Celsius for our climate to have any safety. 2019 was the hottest year on record, and the 5 hottest years on record have come in the last 10 years. So this means that our ice caps are thawing. If we look at the picture of the Arctic here, the lower image is in 1984 and the upper image is 2012. So you'll see incredible reduction in the Arctic ice cap over this time, and this is disrupting weather flows, it's disrupting airflows. And so one of the consequences of that is that you can get these incursions of Arctic air coming down into countries in that northern region of the world. And what we experienced last week is a flow of Arctic air right down into Texas, causing massive, unprecedented snowstorms and ice storms, and many problems for that community. So when we talk about sea level rise by 2100, I'm going to present to you 3 different scenarios. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is saying we can expect 1.1 metre sea level rises by 2018. The NOAA, which is the North American, basically the Weather Association, is saying, well, our estimates are sort of saying 2.5 metres by 2100. And there was a report last year from Garb et al. So there's scientists that think that the IPCC is being way too conservative in its estimates. And they're talking that if we have a 3 to 4 degree temperature increase, that we can expect 4.8 metre sea level rises by 2100. So in Australia, that puts 700,000, even just the 1.1 metre rise puts 700,000 coastal homes at threat. In Senegal, the population, just help me for a moment, is around 3 million, and 300,000 coastal homes, or homes threatened in Senegal. So you see how vulnerable, that's nearly 1 in 10 homes under threat. Globally, 680 million people live currently in low-lying coastal areas that are at risk, and Pacific Islands, Bangladesh, Mumbai, and also those areas of Africa that we talked about. But when we look at fossil records, when we go back to the last time that it was 2 degrees warmer than present, the sea level was 5 metres above the present level. So it gives you a sense of, maybe that worst case scenario is where we're headed if we go for 2 degrees temperature increase. So all of this extra carbon in the atmosphere is resulting in it dissolves in the ocean and makes the oceans more acid by forming carbonic acid. And that weak acidity in the ocean is dissolving the shells of shellfish. And those shellfish and planktons and corals are the basis of our ocean food chains. And so we're seeing a drastic reduction in fish stocks as a result of this, and all of the reefs around, the coral reefs around the world are threatened. Those reefs often are protecting coastal areas from sea. We've seen over half of the Great Barrier Reef in Australia killed off by bleaching events in the last 2 or 3 years. So it's something that's really impacting us. When we talk about extreme weather that we are experiencing, and we will continue to experience more frequent and more severe extreme weather events, from heat waves to droughts to bushfires to floods to hurricanes and typhoons. All of this brought about by the disruption of our weather systems, by the changes in the atmosphere brought about the climate crisis. And we've had unprecedented fires. These images on the right-hand side are from my own home. So these are, here's the bushfires that were burning last year. And the thing that's terrible is that they actually burnt up into rainforests. And so areas that have never been burnt before, or have not burnt in thousands and thousands of years, and where the trees are not adapted to fire in any way, and so they've burnt and they've been killed, and it's had a huge impact on the vast majority of those burnt areas in my region, those rainforests. The research is saying that those rainforests will not regenerate. And in addition, we know that there have been major fires in the Americas, but also in the Amazon and even the Arctic region burning. And all of that smoke puts more carbon into the atmosphere. So we're sort of facing this situation is that as the sea level rises, it's going to become increasingly impossible for people to live in coastal regions that are affected. And we're talking about 26 million new climate refugees per year. And the question is, where are they going to go? Where is their safe haven as their homes become more and more unsafe? So our big challenge is that we face the risk of coming to a tipping point where increasing temperatures will lead to more permafrost and glacier thaws, more droughts and fires, which will put more carbon into the atmosphere, which will lead to further increase. And the point of a tipping point is that you get so far into that cycle that small changes will bring about larger, more important and longer lasting changes. So the urgency for our action is, immediate action. The Intergovernmental Panel is telling us that we could limit warming to 1.5 degrees only with rapid, far-reaching and unprecedented changes in all aspects of society. And so, dear friends, that is our job. That's our challenge. If we are to sustain and build harmony and peace on this beautiful planet that we're part of, we have to be the bringers of rapid, far-reaching and unprecedented changes in all aspects of our society. We've actually got to invent a new way of being on the world. And that process is well underway. Part of what we have to do is to stop burning fossil fuels. That fossil fuel has to actually stay in the ground. We can only afford to burn 5 to 10% of the oil, coal and gas that's available. The rest has to stay in the ground if we're to have any hope of success. Here in Australia, we're seeing a massive shift towards more sustainable renewable energy systems, and globally we've seen the cost of solar go down by 80%. And we had a meeting just last week with the solar energy providers, and they said that globally in the last 3 to 4 months, the whole game has changed, and that renewable energy globally is now much more economically viable, and the storage systems, including battery systems, are much more economically viable. And so it is possible for us to do a rapid shift to renewable energy. We need to shift our farming systems to regenerative farming, that is farming and grazing practices that reverse the impact of climate change. And this is an example of a farm prior to regenerative farming, and this is the same farm after regenerative farming systems were adopted in only 18 years. And I know, Mamadou, this is part of what you're working on, and that process of regenerating and planting green zones will rebuild the organic soil matter and draw carbon out of the atmosphere. So that's a really important strategy. There are many countries in the world that have really fostered becoming carbon neutral, much more than my own country. Australia is one of the worst in the world. Costa Rica is doing really well with 98% of renewable energy production. Interestingly, though, South Australia has, here in Australia, is one of our states that's doing really well. The United Kingdom has set a target of no carbon emissions by 2050. Scotland achieved 100% renewable energy by this year. India and China are doing big investments into renewable technologies. So there's a lot going on globally, which is exciting, but all of us need to be really pushing this. And there are many climate emergency declarations globally. 1,700 communities globally have declared that. Okay, so I'm going to come back to everyone. And what we want to do is we're going to break out into breakout groups. And I'm just hoping, Jennifer, that you've been able to get that all set up. I realise that information is very sobering, and to hear what we need to do. So what I want you to do in the breakout group is to talk together about, sorry, I'll just do that share screen just so you can see again, to talk about how you're feeling after the Pulse of the Planet. And that's just going to be a brief go round and just in your circle, in your breakout room, to talk about how you're feeling. And then together in your small groups, write down what are the things that you're most concerned about. So you'll need someone to record that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come back together and collect all of these ideas, and then we'll vote on what we see as our top concerns. All right. Oh, coming back here. Okay, stop sharing. So Jennifer, how do you need some time? Because we can actually do a game if you like, but
just a couple minutes. Yeah,
a couple of minutes. So look, maybe even while Jennifer's getting the breakout room sorted, what we can do is, I'd like to hear if any of you would like to talk about how you're feeling now. Let's hear from you. Can you put your hand up if you'd like to just share? So, you're aware when we talk about strategic questioning, we look at what we're most concerned about, and then we talk about how we're feeling. How does this affect us? Hands up if you'd like to say something. Katrin, would you like to say something about how you're feeling?
Yes, I can start. I feel a bit scared. We know so many things about the state of the planet, and we're not doing enough. And yeah, it's seems to be difficult to convince the government of like all around the world to just start doing something, because it really needs to be done yesterday, actually.
Yes.
So
exactly.
yeah, I feel worried, scared.
I hear you. I'm wondering if Alpha would like to say something.
Yes, of course. Really, I am a bit sad hearing about all what you see about the planet. What I am thinking is, all what we are doing here is very much important. If we don't put hands together in order to tackle up this situation, it's going to be good for our country in the next years to come.
Yes, absolutely.
Why our government here or other countries cannot come with us so that we can do the fight together? Because this fight is not for us, for the country as a whole, and not for us now, for our generation coming. So this fight is a fight that everybody needs to be involved. I am really happy. I am really happy getting involved in this kind of fight, and I was like thinking, I never knew anything about this before.
Yes.
And anything like damage occur due to climate change is not something good. But I'm happy, bringing this to us, and we are going to stand firm in order to see we can achieve our goal.
Thank you. And I'm so grateful for the climate sensitization work that you've been doing in Sierra Leone. Auntie Carly, would you like to say something?
Overwhelmed again. Statistics just keep getting worse.
Yep.
This time my husband sat in with me and I was able to sort of relay a little bit of that because we talked about it as a house.
Great.
We've done the last one. And I'm hoping to talk about a bit more later on about the regenerative farming.
Yes.
With Jemima. Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Yeah. Great. How are we going there, Jennifer? You ready to go?
Yeah, and 2 more clicks.
2 more clicks. Okay. So what's going to happen is that we'll slip out into breakout groups. And so you'll be with people from different parts of the world. And so your goal is 2 things. One is to talk together about how you're feeling. And the second thing is to write down the things that you as a group are most concerned about. Because we're going to report back and bring that all together. All right. And
how much time again?
I'm looking at this and going, we've probably got about 20 minutes in breakout groups.
Okay, great. So I'm about to open the rooms, and when you see a prompt that says, please join this room, please click that to say, yes, I will join the room.
Can I just make one more comment, Jennifer? And this is about you as facilitators. It's really, really important when you are facilitating this process with young people to model, to lead, to show that it is, you can talk about how you're feeling. You can say, how shocked you are, how sad you are, how scared you are. And to say to the young people that you hear them, to accept how they're feeling. That's a really important part of this journey in your role as facilitators. All right, and make the most of this precious time together as a global community. Over to you, Jennifer.
Okay.
Thank you.
Here we go.